What's up, guys? Thomas Mott here. Welcome to the Thomas Mott Show on a Friday. I'm on the road traveling, but I still wanted to jump on and give you the latest things happening in the National Football League and the Eagles, starting with a different linebacker trade option. All week, people have talked about Devin White this, Devin White that, and then you saw yesterday Devin White wants $15 to $20 million a year, which we're all out on. That's absolutely not going to happen. And so Victor Williams from the Liberty Line has a really interesting article citing Jason Lockenfora and the idea that maybe Patrick Queen could be a linebacker trade for the Baltimore Ravens. Throw it up on your screen. NFL trade rumors. Could Eagles pry away the linebacker from the Ravens? They got some interesting stuff here. Quote, according to Jason Lockenfora, the Washington Post, Baltimore linebacker Patrick Queen is a prime trade fodder ahead of the NFL draft. Lamar Jackson currently could be dealt if another team were to actually acknowledge his existence. I've been hearing for weeks that linebacker Patrick Queen, a first-round pick just 3 years ago, is prime trade fodder as well, with the Ravens recently giving linebacker Roquan Smith a contract. And here's the good news about Patrick Queen. He's 23 years old, joined the Ravens with the number 28 overall selection in 2020, made an immediate impact upon his arrival. In his rookie season, Queen tallied 106 tackles, 2 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles, and was to be named an all-rookie team by PWFA. He had a dip his sophomore year, they say, but a really good 2022 where he had 117 tackles, 6 passes defended, 5 sacks, and 2 interceptions. So this whole idea stems from the fact that, one, Philadelphia might still want a linebacker. Now, I've said before many times, I think they like Nicholas Morrow, they like Davion Taylor, they like, obviously Nakobe Dean, But if you wanted someone else to go ahead and bring in to be competitive at that spot and possibly take over the starting role if Morrow or Dean were to struggle, Queen makes a ton of sense. Now, he is entering his 4th year, but the 5th year is looming, and you could get him for 1 year on the very cheap deal that he currently has via his rookie contract, and then extend him if he's good, or let him go if he walks. Whereas if you trade for Devin White, you have to give him a new contract or else Devin White is not going to play. Patrick Queen will play the final year of his 4-year deal, and then you have the 5th year option to exercise as well. So it's basically Devin White, not as good, but way, way cheaper. And Devin White would cost maybe a 1st-round draft pick. He'd cost maybe a 2nd-round draft pick, maybe a 3rd-round draft pick if you were lucky. Queen would be a 3rd or a 4th or maybe even a 5th-round draft pick when it's all said and done. So it's just a cheaper option overall for the Philadelphia Eagles if they still really want a linebacker, if they still are really interested in trading for one. Now, much like Devin White, this would happen on draft night. This would be a draft night trade that would be out of the blue. Suddenly, Philadelphia would give away a 3rd-round draft pick to bring in Patrick Queen, and that might be an option, especially on day 3, if Philadelphia in round 2 decides to go against, taking Campbell, the linebacker, or they don't get a linebacker if they, of course, wanted one, then you could go ahead and trade for him on day 3. So, likelihood of this happening, just like the Devin White trade, just like a lot of trade rumors, is still very slim, and I always like to mention that. And I can say, oh, they're going to trade for him, it's going to happen for sure, but it's a better option if you want to go cheaper and still want a linebacker than White. So let me know what you guys think. Would you like to rather have Patrick Queen on a cheaper deal and a cheaper price, or would you rather have Devin White because he's obviously, a bigger name and a little bit better, more of a superstar linebacker? Give me your thoughts and your comments down below right now. Okay, let's move over here to a very interesting article. This one comes via Eagles Wire, and they basically went ahead and reviewed a ESPN Analytics website, or ESPN Analytics news article that puts together a chart that shows the likeliest player to be selected on the draft board at each particular pick. And so they go through, obviously, a lot of different picks here, and they come to it with the conclusion that Lukas Van Ness is most likely for Philadelphia in their 1st round. Listen to this, quote, Philadelphia's 2 first-round draft picks, number 10 and 30. They've been linked to some of the top pass rushers, D tackles, and offensive linemen for weeks. When compiling data, ESPN Analytics put together charts that show the likeliest players to be selected on the draft board at each potential pick. For the Eagles at number 14, I think that's a typo, they meant number 10, the player was Iowa defensive end Lukas Van Ness. Van Ness logged 38 tackles, 11 TFLs, 6.5 sacks during the 2022 season with Iowa without starting 1 game. Kind of interesting. Next was Northwestern guard tackle Peter Skoronski, and then Nolan Smith, then Jackson Smith-Njigba, then Christian Gonzalez. So that's the list there. That's according to ESPN Analytics, which, what does that mean? Well, it's the ESPN Analytics machines trying to go ahead and give you a news article. It doesn't guarantee it's what the Eagles and Howie Roseman are actually going to do, but it is something that worth at least bring up is the fact that we all think Jalen Carter, trade up for Will Anderson, get Bijan Robinson. If you don't get any of those 3, that's kind of the list of players or the pool of players you're going to be picking from. Maybe throw in Myles Murphy onto this list as well, but they have more than likely Van Ness available at 10, Skoronski available at 10, Nolan Smith, probably most of y'all's favorite from this list, available at 10, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and then Christian Gonzalez. I think Njigba and Christian Gonzalez would be a massive stretch just because Philadelphia doesn't really need cornerback help right now, and they really don't need wide receiver help as well, despite some people saying, take Jackson Smith-Njigba, he'd be unstoppable as a wide receiver 3, but you really need your wide receiver 3 to be a top 10 overall draft pick. So I think you could throw in Myles Murphy onto this list, but as we've talked about before in our Wednesday live shows with Josh Davis, as much as you don't want to think about it, these guys are more likely than Carter, Will Anderson, Tyree Wilson, or Bijan. If we're being 100% real, these guys are way more likely than the rest of them just because they're going to be there, right? There's no guarantee Jalen Carter will be there. There's no guarantee that you can trade up for Will Anderson. You can afford to trade up for Will Anderson. There's no guarantee Howie will take Bijan Robinson. And so you're not going to like it, but that's a little bit more likely, I would think, than some of the other picks. Now, I'm not a Lukas Van Ness fan. I think later in the draft, 19, 30 would be a much more likely option. But if you're at 10 and you're not going to trade back, that means you got to either take him at 10 or not take him at all. And if they like him enough, then I guess there's a likelihood. But geez, that would be not that great. Now, speaking of all the things we talked about today, our final story comes via the NFL.com and Greg Rosenthal. He has the NFL GM power rankings heading into the NFL draft, and you'll see who reigns supreme. It's crazy how much we love Howie Roseman, but it's crazy how much the rest of the National Football League loves and appreciates Howie Roseman as well. Roseman here is number one, the best GM, according to NFL.com. Quote, no team does a better job using every avenue for player acquisition, balancing current needs with the future. Jalen Hurts' pick in 2020 was an example of forward thinking that changed the course of the franchise. Top 3 picks in last year's draft, Davis, Jurgens, and Dean mostly had what amounted to redshirt rookie seasons, but players selected in the class before, Devontae Smith, Lana Dickerson, helped the team nearly win a title in 2022. Eagles are great at self-scouting, spend a premium on line play. Think Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, Josh Sweat, finding ways to keep their productive long-term veterans like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. Most importantly, Roseman has nailed bringing in players just about to hit their prime, such as A.J. Brown, Son Reddick, Javon Hargrave. Of course, he left. They recognize value, whether that means scooping up James Bradbury late last offseason or finding a way to keep him and Darius Slay around. Hurts' looming big contract will test Roseman's flexibility as a front office that finds answers. All things we've said, all things we've talked about here on the show that Howie Roseman does very, very well. Number 2 is Brett Veach of the Chiefs. I think you'd put him right there with Howie Roseman because the Chiefs have done a great job post the drafting of Patrick Mahomes, keeping really good football teams around him and winning Super Bowls. And then you have, Duke Tobin of the Cincinnati Bengals, Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane of the Buffalo Bills, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan of the San Francisco 49ers. There's a theme here. Les Snead, Sean McVay of the Rams, Brad Holmes of the Lions. I don't know if I would put the Green Bay Packer guy there, but we'll see about the Aaron Rodgers trade. All of these GMs inside the top 10, or at least inside the top 5, are good football teams' GMs. It's amazing how if you have a bad GM, you're going to be at the very bottom of this list. And I can scroll down all the way and you can take your guess who it is. Greg Patton of the Denver Broncos is sitting there at 25. Nicholas Casero of the Houston Texans. Scott Fitterer of the Carolina Panthers. Mayhew of the Commanders. I mean, it just shows you some of these football teams that have been perennially bad the past couple of years kind of stems from the fact that you're either not drafting well, you're not trading well, you're not making good contracts for long-term decisions. Howie Roseman does all of that, and despite what many people will comment in the comment section down below about, I don't want Van Ness, or I don't want Nolan Smith, or I'd rather have Bijan, you can trust that Howie's going to most likely do the right thing. He's not perfect. He's not batting 1,000. We know that. He's made mistakes plenty of times. But in recent history, he's done a pretty good job of making sure that player is going to be an impactful player, whether it's year 1 or whether it's going to be year 2 or maybe even a little bit later. I think Milton Williams being a lot more productive a little bit later on than he was his rookie season. So it can be very interesting to see what Howie does as we are less than 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. We are exactly 2 weeks away from night 2 of the draft, and we're 13 days away from night 1. We live night 1 of the NFL draft with Josh Davis, the special show here on my channel. Be sure to subscribe, thumbs up, and stay tuned for that. Okay, ultimately today on this edition of the Thomas Mott Show, plenty more stuff happening next couple of days, and of course next week. Next week is going to be one of the most exciting weeks in the entire offseason because it's draft week, and so you're going to get a lot more rumors, a lot more crazy stuff on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, very crazy, and then of course day 1 of the draft, it's going to be nuts. We're going to be live, it's going to be a bunch of fun. Hopefully hundreds and thousands of you guys go ahead and tune in for that. Again, I'm Thomas Mott, this has been the Thomas Mott Show.